everyone. This is Erica Cole. Thank you for joining Siemens podcast, Decoding Decarbonization. I'm excited to be Stacy Mahler's guest host. Give you a little introduction of myself. I'm a Siemens employee. I support our clients with global decarbonization, sustainability, energy efficiency, and supply management services and solutions globally. Been in the industry for a little over 19 years, and I'm strongly passionate about sustainability and partnerships with our most strategic clients. On the phone with me today, I have Rich Marino as our guest supplier and customer of Siemens. He is the Global Director of Sustainability at Coherent Corporation. Give a little background on Coherent Corporation. They are a global semiconductor and materials manufacturer. They have over 120 facilities spanning the globe, and they've taken extreme proactiveness in their sustainability goal setting. They've thought about it very strategically and how do they tackle their scope 1, scope 2 carbon emission footprint, as well as scope 3. So as part of today's messaging, I'm excited to collaborate with Rich Marino and talk through what Coherent is doing in their journey. Give a little additional background. Coherent is Siemens 2023 Climate Week Supplier of the Year, and we're going to dig into their 5-lever approach on tackling scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. During this podcast, we'll also talk about Siemens partnership and how it formed to reduce carbon footprinting and eliminate waste, which is a great example for launching 2024 Climate Month in September. Rich, would you like to introduce yourself? We'll get started.
Thank you, Erica. As you said, you're Rich Marino, Global Director of Sustainability here at Coherent Corp. I've been with the company for a little over 20 years through a variety of roles, mostly manufacturing and supply chain, quite a bit of program management as well, before moving into my current position to lead our sustainability efforts about 2 years ago when we started our formal sustainability efforts.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Rich. So let's start with a quick background of Coherent sustainability commitments. Help us understand the drivers behind Coherent's passion to support sustainability. How did you marry customer and shareholder pressures? And how did that affect Coherent's commitment to transformation?
So first off, sustainability is a very wide umbrella of a number of different topics. It includes a variety of environmental, social, governance topics. I think for today, we're going to focus on our efforts on decarbonization. So Coherent is committed to net zero scope 1 and scope 2 emissions by 2040. And we announced that a commitment just a few months ago in December of 2023. It's actually something we've been working on for a number of years. We tend to be very conservative in our management approach. We'd rather undercommit and overdeliver. So, in fact, we're actually already at about 70% renewable energy usage, even though we just announced our commitment a couple months ago. But frankly, we had a couple-year head start. In terms of how we determined our strategy and our priorities, we really followed the lead of our customers. We have a number of very significant customers that have expressed decarbonization not just as an interest, but as a requirement. So while I firmly believe that this is the right thing to do for us as a company and as a society in general, here at Coherent, we don't build our program around the environmental motivations for sustainability. We really build it as a business requirement because in our customers' eyes, it is.
Rich, I know we've spoke about this time and time again, and I'm just constant awe of the tremendous efforts that Coherent has really accomplished with respect to your proactiveness with your sustainability commitments from a couple years ago to where the company is today and the recent announcement of your net zero scope 1 and 2 emission commitments in December 23. It's absolutely impressive and phenomenal. So with a company of Coherent size, how do you manage all of the organization's global data gathering to help with your scope 1 and 2 emissions reduction? And we know it's a massive undertaking. So sharing that insight with us is helpful on how you're tackling just that massive undertaking and aligning it to meeting your goals and objectives.
Sure. That one's pretty easy, actually, because we have Siemens manage it for us, right? In terms of computing the global CO2 footprint for an organization of our size and complexity with dozens of facilities around the world, it is a massive data challenge, right? We're talking 600 or 700 utility invoices every month coming in from multiple countries and multiple languages, and trying to make sense of all that, quite frankly, would be really tough. And if we started this on our own, I think 3 or 4 years in, I would still be struggling to get our arms around the data to know that when I say our CO2 footprint is X thousand tons of CO2 per year, do I really have confidence in that number? Today I do, because we rely on Siemens to help do all that data collection, all the number crunching, et cetera. And quite frankly, I think we could have figured it out on our own. We could have put the effort in to do all that, but I just don't think it would have been a valuable use of our time. We have access to a team that this is what they do. And I think every dollar that we spent on Siemens in that regard has been money very, very well spent, allowing us to focus on using the information and driving the emissions reductions rather than chasing our tail trying to gather the data.
Thank you for that. Siemens is very grateful for the collaboration and the partnership with Coherent and excited for the future. So, with that said, since the December 2023 public sustainability commitment, how's Coherent really been tackling the communication with your facilities, your customers, and your suppliers to help support the transition to net zero?
So let's start with customers, right? There we communicate through a number of channels. I think an annual sustainability report is essential for anyone who's serious about this. We published our first one 2 years ago. We did one last year. We're in the throes of putting this year's together. And in the end, it's just a report, right? And I don't like to overstate the importance of what in the end is just a document. But it is really a compendium of all of our efforts and our chance to showcase to all of our stakeholders, but customers in particular, where we're at. One of the downsides of a sustainability report is it's a custom document, right? And it's hard for customers to necessarily digest all that data, right? So we also rely on a couple industry standard reporting platforms, which puts the same information into a standard format. We've latched on to three, and this is really based on where we saw the most customer interest. So every year we report through CDP, EcoVadis, and the Responsible Business Alliance. There's a dozen other surveys out there, and quite frankly, they all ask for similar information. But realistically, we can't do them all. So again, we are very customer driven. We focused on where we saw the critical mass of customers, and those are the channels that we focus on. With regards to our employees, we consider sustainability to be an all hands issue. In that regard, we treat it very similar to quality and to safety, right? Everybody has a role to play. We ask, in fact, we expect every employee to contribute to energy conservation and resource reduction and reducing waste throughout the company in all aspects, on the factory floor, in the staff jobs, et cetera, through our Coherent Lean initiative. And being more efficient is a concept our employees get very quickly, right? It makes sense. If not for the environmental aspect, just the making the company more efficient, more faster, and improving our profitability. We do also recognize the need to provide training and guidance to our employees on greenhouse gas emissions specifically, because net zero is not a concept that every one of our 25,000 employees understands. And a bold commitment like that, what does that mean at an operational level? For example, we recently rolled out a fossil fuel equipment policy to help make it clear to our employees, especially in our facilities and our engineering teams, look, to get to net zero, we have to wean ourselves off fossil fuels. And we need to start really realizing that it's not going to be easy, right? It may, in some cases, take 5 or 10 or 15 years, which is why we have to start now if we're aiming for a 2040 target. And with regards to suppliers, frankly, we're just getting the ball rolling. Right? We have a net zero scope 1 and scope 2 target. That's about emissions from our factory. That's not all we need to worry about. In addition to being an all hands topic, sustainability is a whole supply chain issue for us. We need to drive the same actions that we're taking into each and every one of our suppliers and further upstream into their suppliers. It started with some very clear messaging from our Chief Procurement Officer and our Chief Quality Officer at our latest annual Supplier Day. So, a very, very clear message from the top that this is important. But similar to our employees, we have to make that a more operational concept for our suppliers and explain much more clearly and much more explicitly what we need them to do. And that's work that we'll be rolling out in 2025.
That's awesome. And it's a lot of work, to your point, with all the different variances and reporting, the needs of suppliers and customers, and balancing all of that is, it's a lot. And I really commend you on how Coherent is approaching it with your suppliers, with your employees, and with your shareholders, so that you're able to really make good headway and progress along the journey. It's it's very impressive.
Yeah, with regards to shareholders, I didn't really talk about them before, and frankly, they can be a fickle bunch, right? Uh, Sustainability is a hot topic in the investment community. Interest waxes and wanes, and some investors are very passionate about it, but quite frankly, there's some investors who are very passionate against it. We have not built our program around what shareholders are asking for. As I mentioned before, we built it around what our customers are asking for. And regardless of a shareholder's opinion on ESG, shareholders are almost universally interested in making sure we're keeping our customers happy.
Picking up on the fossil fuel equipment policy that Coherent has developed and rolled out to your facilities, how are you looking at bridging the technology gaps in the lead time for electrical infrastructure? How are you balancing implementing a no fossil fuel policy while ensuring operational readiness?
Well, it's a challenge, as you mentioned, right? So when you look at scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, scope 2, which for us is mostly tied to electricity usage, is a relatively easy challenge. It's mostly a contracting challenge, going in and sourcing renewable electricity instead of regular grid-fired brown power. The scope 1 emissions, the direct emissions, are much harder, right? Those are places where, in most cases, we are consuming and burning fossil fuels in our factories, and you have to address that with boots on the ground efforts in the factory. It's going to require changes to equipment that can have very long lead times, it can have significant investments. As passionate as I am about environmental sustainability, financial sustainability also matters, right? So we're being very pragmatic about this. We are not just telling our factories, look, you have to go and rip equipment out and replace it with electrified solutions right away. That would be financially reckless in a lot of cases. Some of that equipment, is only 3 or 5 years old and might have a useful life of 10 or 15 years, right? We have other equipment that is 10 or 15 or 20 years old and is due for replacement. And it makes sense to just put in an electrified option instead of a fossil fuel option now. And the cost difference at that point, when you're already replacing equipment, tends to be very small, negligible, or actually, in some cases, we're finding the electrified option is actually economically advantageous because that equipment's inefficiency has improved so much already. So we're being very judicious about it. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a case-by-case assessment, making the right decision at the right time for each piece of equipment in each factory. It's going to take 10 or 15 years, but it's a 10 or 15-year project, and that's why we have to start now.
That's a great point. I also agree and recognize the importance of balancing sustainability progress with respect to your financial sustainability of the organization. I think that's really the key component that most companies are struggling with. It's how do I make this transition in a way that's going to meet my financial requirements? And if we think about that combating with rising energy prices, it's really a massive undertaking because you're already competing with naturally higher markets. Inflation is rising as well over the past couple of years. And so with that said, the inevitable transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy is going to continue to increase the upfront capital costs and drive the need for additional efficiency. So since the public commitment and implementation of the no fossil fuel policy by Coherent, how has facility efficiency optimization improved? Or have you seen a change, or is it too early on?
Well, the policy is pretty fresh. We just issued that within the last 6 months. So we actually don't have a huge amount of data, but early indications are the policy is working, right? We've had several cases, 3 or 4 facilities already, that we influenced decisions, and the site was ready to go off and replace a piece of equipment, a fossil fuel piece of equipment, with a newer version of fossil fuel equipment. And we intercepted that. Now they're looking at electrified heat pumps. The costs have been reasonable, something we were able to absorb and factor that in. I'll admit, we ran into some skepticism and resistance when we first put the policy out, but we had one facility manager who was very upset and adamant that it couldn't be done, and we'll win that individual over with data. But I also had another facility manager who was upset that we didn't issue the policy 6 months sooner because he had just put some new equipment in and was now regretting the decision. It's not a perfect world. This is going to be hard, but the sooner you get started, the more time you have to work through those challenges. Net zero is coming. For us, we've made the commitment.
Since we spent a good bit of time talking about Scope 1 and Scope 2, let's talk about Scope 3 emissions. How are customer pressures for net zero affecting your business? Help us understand how you're working internally with your procurement, sales, and ESG teams to progress Scope 3.
Well, when talking about Scope 3, it's usually easiest to separate it between upstream in the supply chain and downstream in terms of our products. There's absolutely a lot of pressure on Scope 3 upstream. Most of our customers that have a net zero requirement are very clear that that is a Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 requirement. It's not just about our factory operations, but our whole supply chain. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are starting to cascade that into our supply chain. We felt it was very important to practice before we preach, so we had to have a really solid Scope 1 and Scope 2 program and prove that we are making good headway before we ask our suppliers to follow suit. We are at the point now where we are telling suppliers this is a requirement to do business with us. It's not easy. We've got thousands of suppliers involved. The good news is, first of all, we have some suppliers that are already on their journey, which is great. We want to see that. We want to encourage that. There's some suppliers who, frankly, are ahead of us, and we want to learn from their best practices. And the amount of goodwill and willingness to share best practices in the space is tremendous. And that applies to both customers and to suppliers. We also, within our customer base, we are working with some of the world leaders in the space, some of the most sustainable companies on the planet. And they're very demanding, don't get me wrong, but we get to see what they are communicating to the suppliers and how they're communicating to their suppliers. And quite frankly, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. They're willing and they want us to take the pages out of their playbook and help cascade that further upstream. As far as downstream in our products, if you look at the Coherent product portfolio, we have a number of products that are feeding into this mega trend of the world trying desperately to decarbonize. The best example is the products that we have in our silicon carbide business, which is an essential material for the electrification of the transportation industry, essentially the electronics and the powertrain for electric vehicles. We've got countless other examples, and across the board, any of our products that use energy, which is a lot of them, there's a constant drive to make the products more energy efficient. In the end, our customers still have a role to play, right? Whether they choose to plug that laser into a coal-fired power plant or a renewable energy source, that's a decision that they will have to make, not us. But making that laser more energy efficient, that's something that our engineering teams are constantly working on.
Thank you, Rich. It's definitely complex with both upstream and downstream Scope 3 emissions. We ourselves at Siemens are battling through some of the same struggles and how we're going to accomplish our net zero Scope 3 carbon commitments. So definitely is not an easy undertaking. Waste is another complex topic, really not easy to tackle. Coherent has not yet made a formal commitment regarding waste reduction. Can you help us understand a little bit about some of the proactive steps Coherent is taking to reduce waste streams and eliminating landfill waste? How are you navigating the data collection?
In my opinion, it's not possible to make a credible commitment without data. So our first step is to get good baseline data on our global waste footprint. That's actually similar to how we started with our decarbonization journey. We spent a lot of time getting our arms around the data and studying what was possible and doing pilot projects before we made a public commitment. We're taking the same approach with our waste, and similar to how we did decarbonization, we're actually partnering with Siemens to help get our arms around that waste data. In some regards, waste data streams are even more complicated than energy because you have hazardous waste, you have non-hazardous waste, multiple types of hazardous waste, and a lot less standardization in terms of the reporting. It is a headache, it is a challenge, but it's important, and we're going to solve it. Once we have the baseline data, we already have a couple facilities that are more mature than others that have a zero waste to landfill initiative and are making good progress. And while managing the number of sites that we have across a number of different geographies is a challenge, where we have teams that are making good progress, we have a very strong spirit of best practice sharing within the company. And those success stories are being shared within Coherent. And frankly, there are other parties outside of Coherent that are really good at this as well and ahead of us. And we're partnering with select organizations to help teach us and save us that time of having to reinvent the wheel to accelerate our program.
You've mentioned a few times about the partnership that Coherent has built with Siemens to support your decarbonization, sustainability, data collection, your reporting, target setting support. Can you elaborate a little bit about the tools and services that Siemens is providing from your perspective that really offer the best support to Coherent and customers like Coherent?
Everything we've achieved in our decarbonization journey thus far has been with the help of Siemens. And as I mentioned before, I think a lot of what we've done, we could have done on our own, but it would have taken a lot longer to do. We've accelerated our program, in my estimation, by 2 or 3 years by partnering with an expert who's done it before. And when I say they've done it before, they've helped other clients like us do it before, and they've done this within their own operations. And where we've used them, I mentioned earlier, the data collection, which is a huge amount of effort that they made very, very easy for us. It's gone beyond that. In terms of our energy strategy, we look at 3 things. We look at reliability and availability of power, look at having it at a competitive and predictable cost, and we look at sustainability. We use Siemens for energy procurement services, including all of our renewable energy procurement. And they help us optimize not just the environmental sustainability, but again, also that financial sustainability. We also use them in terms of just general sustainability advisory services, understanding what, when you're getting started, is a pretty complex topic, a lot of different terminology, and with a lot of customer interest, making sure you're doing it right and putting out numbers that are credible was very important to us. There are obligations out there, reporting obligations to various government entities that are coming, which are going to bring an even higher level of scrutiny to this that I'm not worried about. It's not that it's not going to be a lot of work, but I know we're doing it right because we're using an expert to help make sure we're doing it right.
Thanks, Rich. That's a huge compliment, and Siemens is very grateful. So, what are the next steps that lie ahead for Coherent in your sustainability journey? And how do you and Siemens plan to support each other moving forward?
I'm incredibly proud of how much Coherent's achieved over the last 2 years, but the job is far from done. It was a huge milestone for us when we passed 50% renewable electricity. All right, let's be honest, 50% is an interesting milestone because it means there's just as much work still in front of you as there is behind you. But at that point, we knew what it would take to do the remaining 50%. There's still work to do, but the problem was no longer fuzzy and uncertain and making you projections about what it would take. It was down to being just work. We're now at the point where we're really digging in on scope one. Those direct emissions, it's going to be harder. It's going to require engagement from all of our factory engineering teams. The ball's already rolling on that. We're making some good progress. Again, there's several years worth of work to do. Scope 3 is going to be the hardest challenge of them all. Again, taking the same kind of things Siemens has done, that we've done, and getting thousands of our suppliers to start moving in that same direction. But it's starting, and over the course of the next several years, we're going to make significant inroads. It's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of work, but we are up to the challenge and we're moving forward.
Super exciting, Rich. I want to take the time to really express my deepest thanks and appreciation for you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to delve into the details of how Coherent is approaching decarbonization and making progress towards achieving your corporate ESG goals. Clearly, it takes a unique combination of workforce motivational techniques, partnership, and technology deployment strategies to help maximize carbon reduction benefits and minimize waste. To listen to our next Decoding Decarbonization podcast, subscribe to the Siemens Decoding Decarbonization series on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.